All right, folks. I think we have gone live. Just change a couple things here. Awesome. Well, welcome, folks, to another Esoterica live stream. It's been a few weeks since I've been able to do one of these. I've just been so super busy. The semester is in full swing. So I'm teaching three university classes, and then on top of that, just the duties that come along with childcare and the channel and everything else. I've just been so crazily busy that the idea of squeezing in a live stream. Oh, and also on top of that, the Kabbalah class, which is finally coming to an end. And this week, the last lecture will be uploaded this week, and so that class went from I thought it was going to be a 9 to 10 episode series to it being a 14 episode series. So that's over 14 hours of content on Kabbalah. And so it was a lot of work. It was a heavy lift, but I'm glad that it's done, frankly, so I can focus up some of my intellectual attention on some other things. And I can get some of my own private reading done. I haven't really been able to get any sort of reading just that I'm interested in doing aside from stuff with the channel and things like this. Haven't been able to get that stuff done in quite some time, so I'm looking forward to getting some other kinds of things read. But that's the reason why we haven't been able to do a live stream here in the past few weeks. I've just been overwhelmed with various kinds of work, but I have been really happy and really excited to see all the really great stuff that we've been able to get done on the channel. Some of the content I've done in the past week or so has been really great. Has been really fun to do. So some of the Enochian stuff, really getting into Liber Loga, which it's a text that's always fascinated me, and I've always wanted to really dive into it. So it was a really great opportunity to reach out to Aaron Leach, who's himself a seasoned practitioner of Enochian magic and other forms of magic. So it was really great to be able to reach out to a practitioner to get his read on Liber Loga and to get his perspective on things and to sort of talk shop about how this text works or what it does and what it is. So that was a lot of fun, and diving into some Gnosticism stuff as well, and some of the stuff on the Cathars, which I knew when I did that Cathar episode, it was going to be very polarizing. People really love the Cathars. And anyone questioning whether or not they existed really was a trigger for a lot of people. People got really angry about the idea that the Cathars may have not existed, at least in the traditional way that that story has been told. Not to say there weren't Cathars, but at least the way that story has gotten told is not accurate to what happened. Yeah, so. It's funny. The live in La Liber Loga is great. That needs to be a song. Actually, we should contact Ricky Martin, see if he'd be interested in doing that. Which would be funny just to translate "live in La Vida Loca" translated into Enochian. But yeah, so that was a lot of fun to work on the Liber Loga stuff and to work on some other things. Working on those things as well. Yeah, and it's interesting, John, that people see the connection somehow between Cathar denial and Holocaust denial, although those are very different animals. And again, I think that what's happening and with the Cathar skepticism is not to say there wasn't violence. I think everyone agrees that there was violence. The massacre at Béziers, no one's denying that there wasn't violence. It's actually arguing that the reason why the violence happened had some other things that were motivating it. And in fact, it makes it even more terrifying, because if there were no Cathars, or if Catharism wasn't really a thing the way that the traditional story tells us, there's something even more terrifying about the idea that all those people got massacred. There's something, at least to me, there's just something even more nightmarish that the people at Béziers were being accused of being something that they weren't and then murdered for that. That somehow boggles my mind, is even more terrifying. So, but yeah, the Cathar stuff is really interesting. I'm going to come back. I think I mentioned this in the episode. I'm going to come back to some of the texts because I think people got the impression that I'm also a Cathar skeptic, and I am somewhat skeptical of the traditional account of the Cathars, where we just read inquisitional literature as if it really happened. I think that's probably not smart. I'm much more sympathetic to the idea that there actually were Cathars than maybe people think. And one of the things I want to do is I want to go back through and actually look at some of the literature attributed to them, especially the book on the first and second principles and things like that. So I want to look at some of this alleged Cathar literature and see what can be mined out of it. So don't write me off as a total anti Kabbalah or anti Cathar person. So don't write me off as that. I'll be coming back to it. Be coming back to that stuff later on. So I've seen a couple of donations come through. I just want to make sure that just make sure that folks get the thanks they deserve. Jeanette Waverly, thanks. Yeah, appreciate your appreciation for the lecture, the series on Kabbalah. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to do. I really hope that folks enjoy it in the sense that you get to see me from a different angle, like the Esoterica videos themselves, right? What you can see, it's like where I shoot them over there in that little corner of my room. You can see that the Esoterica episodes are just so different than tenor and tone than the Kabbalah ones, which are a little bit more, me being a bit more shoot from the hip and irreverent, which is much more my actual teaching style, I think. So maybe it gives folks a bit more of a glimpse into me as a person and my teaching style. But thank you, Jeanette, for sending some bucks through to support that work. And Doug R. also, really thank you. Thank you for the appreciation. Glad you enjoy the live streams. I really like doing these live streams too. I would do them weekly, I think, if I could get away with it, if I had the time. And maybe when and if I'm able to transition Esoterica to a full-time thing, I think I might start doing at least bi-weekly live streams, try to bring other folks on and hang out and just sort of chat about esoteric stuff. So maybe bring different folks on who would be willing to hang out with me and take some questions and hang out and chat. So that's another thing I'm looking forward to doing as well. So something complete. What do you think of Lon Milo's book Chicken Kabbalah? What if I told you I've never read it? It's like one of these classics I think in sort of it's classics in the esotericism occult world for Kabbalah. But I've never read it. I know about it. I don't think I own it. From people that I know, they say that it's it's okay. I've never read it. This is one of these weird disjunctions between, I think, people who grow up in Kabbalah from the Hermetic perspective or from the occult side of things. They're primarily getting introduced to Kabbalah and they're reading the Duquette text as sort of a primer on Kabbalah, whereas someone who's raised in the Jewish environment or raised in an academic environment, as much as people get raised in academic, that's child abuse, I think, to raise a child in an academic environment. But as much as I was raised in that world, my experience with learning about Kabbalah was overwhelmingly firsthand literature and then the classic scholars, Sholem, Idel, the boys club that's slowly changing to include women, Yehuda Leibs and people like this now. So I've not read it, but I need to. It's one of these classic texts that is important, obviously it's important for important reasons, but I've not read it. So what do I think about it? I think about it that I need to read it, and then I'll let you know what I think about it. All right. John Coltrane's Ethic. That is a great name. That's fantastic. I like that name. Oh, St. Coltrane, pray for us. Do you have any advice for internalizing grammar of ancient languages effectively? Greetings from Italy. And thank you, Woodchuck, for the 5 Canadian bucks. Thank you. Internalizing grammar. So there's 2 techniques that I have found that I think work for getting grammar good, which is not grammatical. So it depends a lot on if you can get into a community of people working on the language with you. If you can get into a community of people working on the language with you, trying to actually communicate in the language, in the ancient language, is, I find, the absolute best way of internalizing how a language works. Learning how to think in the language, write new stuff in the language. And like when I say write new stuff, write your own thoughts down in the language. Try to think, learn to think in the language. And I'm thinking here of Latin, obviously. And Latin is really good for this because there is a community of people, the Latina Vivans community, that speak Latin. They communicate in Latin. You can be fluent in Latin. There's a YouTube channel. The guy's name escapes me. He's like a shaved head, and he does like he does Latin and Greek, and he's incredible. I think there's a great episode of him being on the streets of Italy, talking to people in in Latin who are Italian, and it's funny because they have no idea what he's saying, because of course they don't. Um, so I would say that getting into a community of people who speak the language, that's like, for instance, with Aramaic and Hebrew. The best way to do it is to be studying with someone who's working through a text in Aramaic, like the Talmud, and you're just living inside the language. Now that's hard to do in a language like Sumerian, because who the hell's out there trying to speak Sumerian? I'm not even sure which show you do that. But that's the one path. The other path I would say is just translation work. Translating things out of the language and translating things into the language over and over and over again, so that you begin to think in the language. That's hard. I mean, Greek, ancient Greek, Attic Greek, super tough grammatically, super tough. Latin's pretty hard, but not that bad. I mean, medieval Latin's relatively easy, all things told. Um, so that'd be my advice. It's not easy. It's definitely not easy. And I'm not a classicist. I mean, I have some command of some old languages, but I'm not a classicist. I'm not an Assyriologist. I'm not a Latinist. So it's tough going for me too. But it's just at some level, it's just actively being in the language all the time. It's the only way you're going to do it. I think I saw another donation. Oh yeah, Marsha Zeldin. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your donation. Let me scroll up and make sure I'm getting some questions. So I know that I'm terrible at doing this, getting all the questions. I never do this well, so I apologize in advance for doing this. Yes, so Sean Lancaster asked that a lot of current philosophy can be described as logic chopping. So what do I mean by logic chopping? I'm thinking a lot about analytic philosophy. I'm trained in both analytic and continental philosophy, and so a lot of the analytic philosophy, when I think of it as logic chopping, it's just applying logical structures to arguments to see if they work, to see if they're valid, see if they're sound. And at some level, I think that that's obviously rigorous and very important. Clearly, having good arguments is a very important cornerstone of doing philosophy well. I think when philosophy is only that, and it's removed from philosophy as a way of life, and it's removed from philosophy as a way of being in the world, I think you lose something really important about what philosophy is. When it's just sorting out what arguments are valid and sound, that's the logic chopping thing I was talking about. I think you lose something really crucial, maybe something even I would describe as spiritual about the philosophical project. And the philosophical project, so far as I get it, is not only about coming up with propositional truths about reality, but it's also about how those propositional truths change your encounter with reality. And that part of it, the part of it that I think we inherited from the ancient Greeks, and it survives, I think, all the way through the Middle Ages, and it survives in some ways now. That part is sacrificed in that whole process. And so the more that philosophy is made to be the handmaid of something else, whether it's theology or social progress or politics or logic, if all philosophy gets reduced down to being just a mechanism by which you apply logic to problems, which again I think is very important. I've taught logic. I think it's super important. But I think that when it's reduced to that, or when philosophy is amputated from thinking about it as a way of life, I think you lose something really important. And I think this is something that medieval people understood and ancient people understood. Romans understood it, I think. But I think that modernity um, um, didn't. It missed it somehow. And so it's an important loss, and how to regain it, I'm not sure. But I think that's what how I would talk about the logic chopping problem. Um, Let's see. After birth from a black cat and burned to ashes, and see if it will make people hallucinate me. I don't think so. Constellation Pegasus. Yeah, there's all kinds of weird stuff in the very beginning of Masechta Brachot. That there's all kinds of weird things in there about Jewish magic, basically demons, especially bathroom demons. Probably not. I think we shouldn't be hurting cats. So. All right, let me scroll down and grab some more questions here. Oh yeah, I mean, they think, yeah, of course, they think that you can do all kinds of things and see demons. I mean, they think that, yeah, that there are demons all around us, thousands of demons all over. The Shadim are all around us all the time, and so because of the Shadim being around us all the time, yeah, you can use these techniques to see them. But they say that it will overwhelm you if you do it. It's a bad idea because it will. There's so many of them that it's blinding. So you shouldn't. Yeah, you shouldn't do it. All right, let's scroll back up. Any recommendations for books that aid in the self-learning of Hebrew? Yeah, I always recommend the textbook by Kelly. That's, in my opinion, the best book if you want to teach yourself Hebrew. It's the Hebrew book by Kelly. Let's see if I can pull it up real fast. This question a lot. Pull it up real fast. I'll throw it in the chat. I'll just throw the ISBN in the chat if folks want to look it up so that you can buy it at whatever place you think is appropriate. So this is the book that I tend to recommend to folks if you want to teach yourself Hebrew. It's by Kelly, and it's great. You begin reading Hebrew, reading Bible, and you set out immediately by doing that. So it's fantastic in that sense. You're not reading made up sentences and stuff. You're immediately reading things from the Bible, which is where you need to begin. No one is going to ever. People often think that for instance, people interested in Kabbalah want to start off reading Kabbalistic texts. So they want to start off reading the Sefer Zohar, the Sefer Yetzirah. They want to start off reading these complex texts from the 19th century or something. You're never going to be able to understand those texts without a firm grasp of reading Bible. It's impossible. You have to learn to read the Bible fluently. And so that's just part of it. So without a mastery of the Bible, without the Hebrew of the Bible, you're never going to get anywhere with Kabbalah. It's just not going to happen. All right. Would I ever do a video on queer themes and mysticism? That's a really great question. I would like to do an episode on that. I think there's a lot of really cool and interesting, like homoerotic and androgyne, like ambiguous eroticism in terms of gender and queer theory that certainly exists in Kabbalah, and I think in Sufism as well. Yeah, I don't know if I'm equipped to do that intellectually, but maybe it would be really cool to really double down on learning more about that stuff, and then bringing on some folks who are experts to talk about it. But yeah, that's an absolutely fascinating avenue into this kind of material. So yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question and a great topic that I should get into. Yeah, I've dealt a little bit with women in mysticism, which is a topic that I think is with the Beguines and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that transitioning into other specifically queer theory stuff would be cool. In light of Halloween coming up, are there any supernatural, occult, or magical experiences that have genuinely scared me? I think for them to genuinely scare me, I would have to actually have them first. So I've not, to my knowledge, had a supernatural, occult, or magical experience that I was aware of that was in fact supernatural, occult, or magical. So I've never seen a ghost, and I've never cast a spell. I've never, something like that. I've never done anything like that. I never tried to like cast a spell to get a girlfriend or something. So I would have, in order for it to scare me, I would have to have done it, and I have not done it. So no. So I've never had a supernatural experience. I don't think I've seen a ghost or anything. I would like to. That would be cool. That'd be a neat thing for me to. That'd be a neat thing for me to see. Logos of Ophiel, the Thabit Ibn Qurra's De Imagnibus. Yeah, I'm going to do an episode on it at some point. I've been meaning to do an episode on it. The reason why I haven't is just because I haven't pulled the trigger on buying the more recent translation. I don't think I'm going to say something wrong here. My understanding is that it was thought not to have survived in Arabic, but I think I remember, and I might be confusing it with something else, that they found recently, in the past like 5 years or something, they found a part of it. They found a part of the original Arabic text. I could be wrong about that. My memory's not totally, obviously not perfect, but yeah, I would like to do an episode on Thabit Ibn Qurra's text, and I need to pick up the standard version. But again, like I said, I think that a fragment of it in Arabic has been recently found. I could be wrong about that, but I think I remember hearing about that somewhere and read that. Lady Longsleeves. Did I watch Snappy Dragons? Yes, I did watch it. I watched it today, actually. I finally got some time to watch it, and I actually recommended it from my channel. I watched it. I think it's a really great episode, and I recommended it from the channel, from my channel, because I really think it's a great complement to the recent episodes on Malleus Maleficarum, and on the episode today about flight. And she just does a really great job of tackling it. It's also nice because she has more expertise, obviously, on the history of costume and stuff. And so it's nice that she can cover that stuff in a way that I certainly couldn't. And so her episode was really great. So absolutely, it was great. It was a great episode. So I linked it from my channel. Yes, Sophia, thank you so much. From Denmark Kroners, I think. Many practitioners of Julian Hellenism are influenced by Iamblichus, Proclus, and what is curious on your thoughts on Neoplatonism and theurgy generally. My general thoughts on Neoplatonism. What do I think about it generally? I think what fascinates me the most about Neoplatonism, generally speaking, is how seriously it takes one fundamental problem. I always, I think Heidegger said this. Heidegger commented that most philosophers really just deal with one problem. They have one problem, and they spend their entire lifetime with the one problem. And I'm always fascinated by schools of thought that wrestle basically with one problem. For Buddhism, it's suffering, and they just wrestle with that problem. And everything ultimately comes down to this problem of suffering. And I think that at the basis of Neoplatonism, the problem for them is the gap between the infinite and the finite. That they find that this gap between the infinite and the finite it's an insurmountable kind of thing to them. And what I find interesting about it is the logic that they develop, not so much the answers that they give, because I don't know what I think about the answers that they ultimately give, but the logic that they develop to solve that problem is so crucially important to the development of Western thought that I think that it basically becomes the dialectic that ultimately Hegel systematizes in his philosophy. And so, and you can see it develop in Proclus and certainly in Plotinus and other folks, less in Iamblichus, because I think Iamblichus is more interested in sort of a religious solution to this problem, right? He wants to short circuit it by theurgy, which I'll say something about in a second. And I think that the inner logic that develops first, you can first see it developing in Plotinus, and then certainly by Proclus, and then you can see it developing with people like Nicholas of Cusa and even Pseudo-Dionysius and things like this. That the dialectic that they develop to solve that problem, regardless of the solution they give, is maybe one of the most decisively important moments in the history of Western philosophy. They develop a logic to solve a problem because the logics that they inherited didn't work. And that to me is incredible genius. It's breathtaking. And so I tell people that when I think about the crowning achievements of ancient philosophy, and people say, what's the most important text of ancient philosophy? For me, the most important text of ancient philosophy in many ways is Proclus's Elements of Theology. That's the text I think blows almost everything else out of the water because of the logical rigor that it involves, and also the kind of rigorous speculative work that he does through that text and following the course of his logic through that text. It's breathtaking. There's nothing like it until Spinoza, really, in many, many ways. And so I tell people, Proclus's Elements of Theology is, in many ways, to me, both breathtaking in its intellectual rigor, but also in the logic that drives it. And I find that to be, at least at the heart of Neoplatonism, something that's just really, really incredible, and something that I think gets written off in some ways, because it either gets written off because scholars of philosophy tend to think of Neoplatonism as just a bunch of hypostases, and they think of it as just a sort of a metaphysically promiscuous ontology that just introduces more and more and more hypostases to solve the problem. And that's also where I criticize it. I think it does do that. But the logic by which it does that, to me, that's where their genius lies. It's not in the hypostatic systems. It's actually in the logic that develops and unfurls those hypostatic systems. Iamblichus' great genius, of course, is that he just short circuits the whole system. He doesn't give a damn about all that, really. He says, if you want to reach the gods, you pull them down. We don't ascend to the gods by thinking about all the ways that we can go up through the various structures of the hypostases. We bring them down through theurgy, and he short circuits it by using magic, or theurgy. And I think that's an interesting zig, right? Whereas Proclus zags, the applicant zigs at some level. And I think that that's an interesting path. And of course, it sets the stage for basically all of Western magic, at least at the philosophical register. There simply is no Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy without Iamblichus's work. So that's a really long answer. That should be a lot longer, actually, about what I think about Neoplatonism. I have a long, tortured relationship with Neoplatonism. Very long and very tortured. And that is what I think about it now. That I'm more impressed with the logic that drives it than I am with the answers that they give, but it is really important. And theurgy is an interesting kind of theurgy is an interesting kind of short circuiting of the system. So, which I think is neat. I think it's dangerous though, but it's neat. All right, Sophia, that was a long answer. I hope that was at least interesting and maybe different than what you expected. But that was my answer. All right. I maintain a very scholarly approach. How do you feel that most of your community seems to be contemporary practitioners, somewhat less scholarly? I don't think there's anything inherently less scholarly about practitioners. I think a lot of the practitioners that I've talked to and met are really scrupulously scholarly people. Their agenda obviously is not academics for the sake of academics, perhaps like it is for me. But look at Stephen Skinner or Aaron Leach and other folks that I've talked to. They're clearly scholarly people. What do I think about the fact that my viewership is largely practitioner? Well, I guess that the feeling and the thinking that I have around that is just that I'm very honored. I feel very grateful. I feel very honored that people for whom this is a spiritual path, and for people for whom this is a spiritual and religious vocation, would give me the time of day and would give me their attention, and they would engage with the material that I'm presenting in a way that's critical and thoughtful and engaging. That they would do that at all. That's just, to me, that's a kavod, right? That's an honor. And I feel a lot of humility about that. I feel humbled by that. And I feel very thankful that that people for whom this would be a spiritual path would engage with esoterica and would engage with this academic approach. And I hope that whatever small contribution that I make to the forwarding of this academic enterprise, this intellectual enterprise of making this material more accessible to people, but insofar as I make it more accessible, and insofar especially as that accessibility cashes out for people in terms of their spiritual betterment or their religious vocation becoming deeper and richer, then that's all the better. I'm all the more thankful that's a thing that's happening insofar as it is. So that's my general attitude. That's my general thinking. So Paula, have you ever done any rituals or spells? No. Well, I think I answered that earlier, kind of. Yeah, but I never did. Never have experimented with any kind of magic or anything like that. Just not part of my metaphysical worldview, not part of my religious worldview. Just not a thing that I've ever done. So what does it mean to say that you're a structuralist in regard to esotericism? Well, I'm not a structuralist in regard to esotericism, but a structuralist just in general. Would you reject post-structuralist claims that esotericism are just, yeah. So what does it mean to say I'm a structuralist? It means to say that I think that that reality is fundamentally structured, and that human relations are structured, culture is structured, and that the task of philosophy is to uncover the nature of those structures. That's what I think philosophy does. It uncovers the nature of those structures. And that is what the analytic side of my philosophical my approach is that we're looking at linguistic structures, social structures, economic structures. We're looking at mimetic structures at the religious level, etc. And the task is to see how those structures interrelate with one another. Now, would I reject the post-structuralist claims that esotericism or this language is an expression of the unconscious? I don't know if that's inherently a post-structuralist claim. I think that Lacan would make that claim, and he was, to me, certainly a structuralist. Um, what do I reject a lot of post-structuralism? Yes, I do. Now I do take the claim that the post-structuralists make, that they do say that it may be the case. They say that truth claims are not that truth claims are not exhaustive of structures. And they may be right from a practical point of view, but to abandon the possibility of making truth claims about reality, which is, I think, is the gutter of post-structuralism and the gutter of postmodernism, the kind of relativism about the truth, where truth is just power, or truth is just discourse, or truth is just or whatever, this kind of stuff. These somewhat stereotypical ways that post-structuralism gets and postmodernism get lampooned, I think, by some people, it's not entirely wrong. And insofar as that version of post-structuralism or postmodernism, insofar as that part is true, I reject that. I think we can tell the truth about the world. I think we may not be able to discover all the truths about the world, maybe even only a very meager amount of them. But I'm not interested at all in relativism, moral relativism, or truth relativism. I think that is a gutter, and I think that at the end of that is a nightmare, where anyone thinks anything and they're right. And I think that's a nightmarish position. So would not want to go down that path, and do not go down that path. Let's see. Am I a D fanboy? I just find him interesting. I mean, if it would have been anyone else who'd left behind that much writing, I'd have been studying them. I'm not particularly that attached to D. It's just that we have a lot of stuff, so it makes him a bit easier. You would actually think that I'd be much more interested in Giordano Bruno, because he's much more philosophically interesting in many ways than D. Maybe it is just how bizarre the D stuff is that I find so interesting. Also, I think the D stuff is really badly misunderstood. I've met so many people that claim to practice Enochian magic that I don't think I've ever even read the D diaries, and that kind of weirds me out. It's just like, should it weird me out? It shouldn't weird me out. I meet so many people who claim to be Christians and Jews and never pick up the damn Torah. So yeah, it shouldn't be that weird. It just seems to be the common religious thing where people claim to be religious and they don't read anything or whatever. So goes people. All right. Would I do a video on the Golden Dawn system? Maybe, breaking down. Maybe. I'm just not that interested in 19th century occultism. Once we get to 19th and 20th century occultism, my interest drops off dramatically. And that's a personal failure of mine to appreciate what's really amazing about that stuff. And it's just like a personal preference where I'm just not that interested in it. There's something about it that's always, what's the word? There's something about it that always seems so. It seems that it sacrificed intellectual rigor for becoming like a system of a magpie, where they just gather all this stuff together and make it into a giant magpie. And it always struck me as a mess. And then the drama that's so associated with the Golden Dawn and all this various orders and magicians and all this stuff that exists. I don't know. It just, the drama associated with me just it rubs me the wrong way. And even contemporary drama and sort of the occult world just kind of weirds me out. I don't know. That stuff kind of like makes me skeptical of. I don't like that stuff. And that kind of drama in the Jewish world too also weirds me out. I don't like it. But eventually I'll have to get to it because it is important. And whether it's only my personal bias that where I look at it and I go, ugh, that is just incorrect. I'm just incorrect about that. And so I have to overcome my own personal biases because obviously it's incredibly important in the history of Western esotericism. Also, I will say this. I think that people focus way too much on the 19th and 20th centuries. And they focus so much on that stuff because there is so much drama and it's fun to read about, with all the people hating each other and W.B. Yeats and Crowley getting into it and stuff. And all that stuff is fun because all the drama is fun. It's sort of like a soap opera of occultism, which needs to be a thing. Why isn't there a soap opera for occultism, like beside Dark Shadows or something? So I think that stuff is interesting, but I guess what I'm concerned about is there's so much before that that I feel like I want to have a foundation with that stuff first. And I feel like most people have very little exposure to that material. Both who have very little exposure to that material. So they'll go to a Gnostic mass, and the Gnostic mass is an important part of spirituality, but Gnostic texts often get just not read. we actually have like a library of Gnostic literature that often just goes underread. And to me, I'm much more interested in laying a foundation that says, let's read this material, let's read all of it, let's read it all very carefully, and then begin the process of building up a knowledge bank, knowledge structures, and then we can begin talking about more later stuff. So, ever consider making a video about Lilith and the historical mechanisms used to deter her? Yeah, I would like to make an episode just on the development of Lilith, or going all the way back to the Lilitu from the Sumerian period all the way up until her reclaiming as a sort of Jewish feminist character, and people really like Lilith these days. So yeah, definitely would like to do an episode tracing out her her development through time, which is really fascinating. She's been around for a minute. Evidently, demons appeared to Solomon in his court in front of everyone. Why is all the demon stuff in the Talmud and not in the Hebrew Bible? Because by the time that the legends didn't exist, by the time the Hebrew Bible existed. But the time the Hebrew Bible was written down, those legends hadn't come into existence yet. All those Asmodeus myths that you see in the Talmud, they're at least from the Persian period, right? Because Asmodeus is a Persian demon, and so none of those legends existed until the Persian period. They must have developed during the Persian period, and so that's why they're on the Hebrew Bible. They just didn't exist yet. No, they didn't exist yet. Metaphysically promiscuous. Yes, people love this phrase. This is an actual phrase, by the way, metaphysical promiscuity. This is a term people use in philosophy to talk about basically violations of Occam's razor. When you introduce more and more entities to solve a problem that you don't need to, this is sometimes referred to as being metaphysically or ontologically promiscuous. I love that phrase. I want to there's a part of me that wants to be. I'm very repulsed by metaphysical promiscuity, but I'm just like a metaphysical Puritan. I really need to go on a bender and really indulge my full-blown desire to be metaphysically promiscuous. You have to be metaphysically promiscuous positive, I think. At least sometimes. Everyone needs a good bender every once in a while. Metaphysical and regular. So Isabel asked about the work I did with Chris Brennan, who's just a lovely guy. I just got to say, I've worked with Chris a couple times now, and I just really love talking to him. I really love his approach. He's just a kind. It's always so nice when there's a person who's so kind and so knowledgeable, and just there's no hints of pretension or anything, and just having a really genuine conversation about these topics because you're both interested in them. And of course, Chris is interested both on the practical side and otherwise. And so he's just a lovely dude, and I really appreciate him. So Chris, if you hear that. Is astrology something I use? It's just something I study historically. I'm a skeptic about astrology. I'm not a believer in astrology either as a science of signs or as a science of causation. So I'm interested in neither of those at some level. So I'm a skeptic when it comes to astrology. I like the history and the philosophy of it, exploring it. Also, I like fate. I think I'm one of the rare people that I've met in the world that I really don't like the idea of free will. Free will is I think a toxic idea, basically. I'm not sure that it's true. I'm much more convinced of the reality of some kind of determinism. And so it's interesting that insofar as I'm interested in astrology, I'm mostly interested in it because of its commitment to the concept of fate and how fate seems like possible, maybe even likely to me, that this is all, that I've played this part out already. It's all done. It's all played out, which is interesting to me because when I was talking to Chris kind of off camera, I asked him, to what degree does fate play a role for modern people in astrology? How often do you meet hard determinists, people who really do believe that the world is determined and that the stars at some level reveal that determinism or even cause it? And much to my surprise, I guess I shouldn't be surprised by this, but to my surprise, he said that it's a very minority position, that very few people are determinists, and that most people see astrology as a means to sort of see what's going to happen in order to avoid it. And for me, I'm much more stoic in my orientation toward astrology, where to me, it makes much more sense that if the world's determined at all, then it's fully determined. I think that there's a logical. I think it seems to me that any determination is all determination. It's either on or off. And if it's on, then the Stoic argument, which seems to be the overwhelming argument in antiquity, is that it's not about you changing your fate, it's about you accepting it internally. And that to me makes so much more sense. So yeah, I hope they'll work with Chris more. I really appreciate him. And it's great to be able to have a conversation where me as a skeptic and him as a person who's committed to doing astrology can have a congenial conversation about a topic. And I think neither of us feel the need to go after each other, or like, I don't feel the need ever to like, you know, poo on people who do astrology, who believe in astrology, whatever. I don't really understand that impulse. I can offer up my skepticism for it, and at the same time still appreciate that that's part of people's spiritual and religious lives, and it's a way of talking about all kinds of important things in people's lives and things like that. So, so I'm all about that. Let's see, jump down. Whoa! All right, there's been a lot of questions, and guys, I'm super sorry that I'm not going to get to them. Let me make sure to get this folks for the super chat, because I want to make sure I'm definitely supporting folks who are, or answering folks who are giving hard-earned money to the channel. Yeah, it's interesting. Constellation Pegasus. Yeah, I don't have a science background at all. No, I don't have any science background aside from what I've read. And determinism versus free will. I think I'm in determinism camp. Frankly, I'm more in determinism camp. Yeah, I think that free will is. I think free will is neither logically makes sense to me, and I think it's a kind of pernicious belief in general. But I could be totally wrong. Again, you guys, it's funny. A lot of folks on the channel ask me what I believe about stuff as if I'm some kind of authority on. Like, I just happen to have a PhD in philosophy. That makes me kind of a little bit knowledgeable about philosophy, and I will say a little bit. PhDs are only like, they know a tiny about one thing. So I have a background in philosophy, but I think that I really hope that no one ever comes to these live streams looking for answers to anything of metaphysical import, because I do not have them. And I am, trust me, if you don't like the answers I give, and if you think that I'm wrong, trust me, the amount you think that I'm wrong probably is nothing compared to the amount that I think that I'm wrong. So I offer any ideas I have with the most absolute provisionalism that I can. Alan Moore. Matt asked about Alan Moore and his works. I've never read Alan Moore. This is so embarrassing. This is the live stream where I can embarrass myself of all the things that are clearly important to so many people that I've never read. I read all these weird books. You can see them on the background of my shelf. I have all these weird books that I read, and there's so many of these classic texts by so many people, like Alan Moore or the sort of 20th century occultist. I'm trying to think of Franz Bardone and stuff. I've just never read that stuff. So it's one of these places where I think people are asking me about these things, and I need to read them. I need to get to them eventually. It's just that I'm sure folks can see that I've spent so much of my time in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance and the late classical world and all the way up to 19th century, and I've just not made it to 20th century and 19th and 20th century occultism yet, where I feel like for most practitioners, they begin there and work their way back. They begin with Aleister Crowley, they begin with Austin von Spar, they begin with 20th century folks, and they work backwards. Insofar as they work backwards, I've done the exact opposite. I started way back, right, Sumerians, and then worked my way forward. I just haven't to reach where a lot of folks are in terms of their reading. So I think it's just a weird. I don't know what the right word is. I did it backwards, guys. I did it backwards. So maybe I'll have to catch up to all y'all, because you guys seem to know so much of this stuff, and I do not know the more 20th century stuff, not as well as y'all do. Got to catch up. Got to catch up. All right. Let me see some other questions. Let's make sure I'm not getting the questions here from the super chat. Patrick. Hey, Patrick. Would I explain my own spiritual religious beliefs and practices? I don't have any, I wouldn't call them spiritual practices, because I'm not sure what that means to me. I think I have some sense of what it might mean to other people, but I don't have any of those. In terms of religious practices, I study my religious texts. I pray sometimes. I like communal prayer. I don't like individual prayer. So when I have the chance to do communal prayer, I love to do communal prayer. I love to pray the morning prayer, Shachrit. chakras. I love to pray the morning prayer. I like to engage in religious study. So it's a very intellectual kind of Litvish kind of religiosity. Um, I try to have a I try to have a Shabbat practice. I'm not often very good at it. Um, what else does my religious beliefs look like? I think that they're very intellectual. I think it's a very intellectualized Judaism. I mean, I know you wouldn't look at me and think that, but it's a highly intellectualized form of Judaism that has some adjuncts of spirituality in very careful certain circumstances. So I really love traditional Jewish prayer life, and one of the things I really look forward to in being able to do this in the next few months. And one of the things I really miss is having a pretty rigorous prayer life where you're praying 3 times a day. You're really focusing on your kavanah, on your concentration. You're really focusing on maintaining a Jewish, for me, a Jewish rhythm through the year. So I miss that, and I look forward to having that again at some point. Um, but I got to tell folks, and this is no slight to anybody, but I cannot get down with like Zoom life spirituality. I can't do it. Whether it's Zoom life synagogue, shul, whether it's Zoom life, I can't get down with Zoom life Dungeons and Dragons. Like my life has lived so much with screens, but the idea that I could achieve any kind of spiritual chizuk, any kind of kavanah, it just the screen just breaks it for me. So I'm living in the galut, in the Zoom galut, and so in the Zoom galut, I can't get a connection. I can't get the thing I need. So God willing, I'll be able to get back into a more connected environment and be able to have that kind of spiritual connection. But it's a long rambling answer, Patrick, and I'm sure it's inadequate. And it's also changed over the years. So that's another topic for how my connection to this stuff has changed over time. Things like that. All right, let me jump down and get the folks from the super chat. Determinism, yep, I'm on that camp. I see some folks liking Dark Shadows. That's because you are the cool kids. Dark Shadows is the best. I can just like anytime that I'm feeling kind of blue, I can just turn on straight up turn on the Dark Shadows theme and feel awesome. Just like feel super goth. It's so good. So good. Drew Duncan, you're a logic shopper. I'm about the logic shopping life. I can do it too. On the occult, I saw that. Yeah, I've thought about that too. That it's just additive, right? That maybe it's not 124 or whatever. It's actually 124. And it's interesting, and it's cool that you pointed this out because I think I noticed it back when I was looking at Agrippa a long time ago. That I was trying to sort out that column too, and I noticed that the numbers seem non-random, but I could never figure out what the non-randomness was. But there's clearly, it seems like they're non-random. That you get something that looks like kind of a pattern, but but I can never make heads or tails of it. And I can never decide on what was beneath the pattern, if there was anything. Also, I will say this: it sucks, and this is just a thing about early modern printing, is that even in the 1533, right? The 1533 is reliable, but not when it comes to numbers, and not when it comes to Hebrew. And it's just because it's badly corrupt, and those corruptions have snuck all the way in. And I'm looking forward to reading the new translations because I really hope that they've traced out the history of the corruption of the Hebrew numbers and letters. And I wonder also if there is some kind of algorithm that produced those numbers, and it seems like there probably has to be. He's not going to put random numbers in there. That even if it isn't random, what happens if there's a corruption? And if there is a corruption, and if you use an additive scheme like I think the one that you pointed out, that if there's a corruption at all, then that obliterates the ability to find what the underlying algorithm is, because it would obliterate it because there's just a paucity of data. And for me, it seems like it'd be impossible to know the difference between a corrupt algorithm generating noise and an actual algorithm that generates noise because of a corruption, or just random numbers. So I don't know what to do with that. But I've talked to several people who are mathematicians and stuff, and if they can recognize any numbers in that sequence, and I've never heard anything that seems convincing to me that Agrippa would have used, and why those numbers. It is weird. It is weird. All right, jump down and see some other things in the super chat. Well, Pegasus. Yeah, well, written history is way definitely a latecomer. I mean, writing at all. We've existed for 200,000 years. The fact that that we that we're we're it's frankly not only writing, but civilization might be a fad, folks. We've only been doing it for like 8,000 years. This could be a total fad. Civilization itself could be a total fad, and I would not be surprised if they look back in 50,000 years and think, wow, like they did that whole civilization thing. What a terrible idea that was. I could absolutely believe that would be possible to have happened. All right, let me jump down because I think I've gotten all the super chat questions. Let me. Oh, and Swedenborg also. I want to get to him as well. They have the new 5-volume edition of his works. I need to get at some point. That stuff is. I need to get those by the Swedenborgian folks. All right, let me jump up and see if I can grab some more questions. I'm gonna be here. I'm gonna be able to be here for an hour and a half, so I have like another half hour to hang out. 40 minutes. So I'll get to hang out with you guys, which is awesome. All right, let me see here. So many great questions. Would I consider the gods of ancient times to be actual entities, i.e., spirits or sapient manifestations born from the human psyche? Um, that's an interesting question. I guess I like Xenocrates, right? Xenocrates said famously that the Ethiopians make their gods like black with woolly hair, and the Thracians make their gods with red hair and pale skin, and the Greeks make their gods with olive skin or whatever, and they're all wrong. I tend to believe Xenocrates. I tend to think he's right. I'm not sure if the gods are manifestations of ancient. Or I'm not sure they're actual ancient entities. Although I do like the old Dungeons and Dragons idea that once people quit believing in gods, they kind of die and they go to the astral realm. Which I always just like the idea that like Marduk and uh, I don't know, Baal are floating around the astral realm somehow half dead. That idea has always fascinated me. I always like the idea of being able to spell jam and go see the old gods. You can bring them back to life. You can have people believing in them or whatever. But no, I think I'm kind of a projectionist when it comes to that. I think that you get the God that you want, and people got the gods they wanted. They got the gods that function in their society, and gods that were incapable of changing over time went extinct. And I think that's part of the Israelite success story, is that they had a theology. They had this Deuteronomistic theology. It was wrong. It was objectively proven wrong by the Babylonians destroying their civilization. And they could have either given up on their God, which is what many people did when something like that happened to them. Their gods just went extinct. Or you could change your God. And what chutzpah, what incredible theological bravado. They changed their God. And they kept changing their God. And that's why when I look at the God of the Hebrew Bible and the God of the Israelites, I don't see the same theological set of the propositions that are true about those beings are incommensurate. And so what's interesting to me is how they updated their God. And I think that's a fascinating relationship to your God, is that your God is not sort of a thing that can't change, but your God is capable of change and will change to the circumstances in order to meet the needs of the people that worship that God. And I find that to be incredibly interesting. Trithemius Finnegan, that's a great name. The difference between theurgy and thaumaturgy. Thaumaturgy is just making miracles. It's any kind of miracle making. Thaumaturgy is any kind of miracle making. And theurgy is specifically getting the gods to do stuff for you. Typically, it's getting things done via the gods. And so typically getting things done via the gods can be everything from putting the gods inside of a statue, like classic Hermeticism or Iamblichus, or it could be prayer is a kind of weak form of theurgy, but thaumaturgy is just any kind of miracle making, any kind. So let's see. Andrew, what do I think angels and demons are? I think that I don't know that I'm not sure that they're personified aspects of us. I think it depends on the civilization, the time period. An old friend of mine actually has written a book on angels and demons, especially angels in the late classical Jewish world, which I'm looking forward to reading. And again, I think that these things change over time. What a demon was, what a daemon was for an ancient Greek, for Socrates, is very different than what a daemones were for the Christians. It's just the idea changed. What the nature of these things changed. They went from being basically neutral beings, sometimes quasi good and quasi bad, to being always bad. And so, what these beings are changes over time, and tracking that change is what's often most interesting to me. All right. Time is a flat circle. Yes, I like that. I will say that the first season of True Detective was some of the best television show watching that I've seen in a long, long time. Philosophically speaking, it's some of the best. I really, really enjoyed True Detective season 1. Also, I'm watching all these vampire shows now for some reason. I don't know if other folks have seen Midnight Mass. It's a new Mike Flanagan series, Midnight Mass. It's excellent. It's incredibly good. And it's incredibly good, and I won't spoil anything. But the best thing about Midnight Mass is how am I going to use the word heresy? Yeah, I'll use the word heresy. How a heretical interpretation of scripture can quickly develop. How a scripture can be mined to generate a completely new and dangerous religion. And I find that and it shows Mike Flanagan's real genius as a writer, to basically take what was happening. You have this one person in the show she knows the Bible so incredibly well that she's able to mine it to basically create a new variant of a religion to justify what she wants to believe. And the writing that accomplishes that, and the mining of scripture and the stitching of scripture together to make that work, that is genius writing, folks. I love Mike Flanagan. He's a cool dude. I'd love to meet him. And I will say that was the most impressive thing about Midnight Mass, is watching that development over the course of the show, watching someone develop a theology using a text, and then developing and skewering that theology to justify what blah blah blah. Worth watching. Maybe that angle would interest some folks to watch it. So you haven't seen Midnight Mass, it's worth checking out. The other show I'm watching right now is Chapelwaite, which is not philosophically that interesting, but great classic gothic horror. Speaking of dark shadows, so it's good. So it's I guess it's vampire show season. I feel like I'm obviously I'm watching vampire shows. Obviously I'm watching vampire shows. All right. Let's see. We jump down to get some more questions. It's the goal of Western philosophy now to unite Aristotelian material science and Platonic Hermeticism. That was certainly the goal of Byzantine philosophy. They were all about that, it was called the greater and lesser harmony. The lesser harmonies were trying to harmonize Plato and Aristotle with themselves, because obviously Aristotle says all kinds of internally contradictory things. Like, it's my favorite. Oh, in the Eudemian Ethics, Aristotle says there is no science of being qua being. There's no metaphysics. You can't do it. He just says right out in the Eudemian Ethics, there is no metaphysics. It's not possible. There is no science. There is no logos of being qua being. And then he goes on and he writes the metaphysics. He's like, all right, now we're going to write the book about the science of being qua being. And I love that. That ish blows my mind. I love that in Aristotle. He just like, nope, you can't do it. It's not possible. And then he's like, let's do it. So you have to harmonize Aristotle with himself, and ditto Plato. Plato changes his mind constantly. The later Plato, the Plato of Parmenides, is inconceivable when you look at the early Plato of the early dialogues and stuff. So a lot of folks spend a lot of time harmonizing them with themselves. There is no Platonism to be found in Plato. There is a progression of Plato's thought that gutters out in Parmenides, and it ultimately the Parmenides is skeptical about the forms and things like this. So before you harmonize them, you have to actually harmonize them with themselves. You have to generate something that is Platonism and Aristotelianism, for that matter, which is not latent and natural to the text. And then, if you really want to go completely insane, you harmonize them with each other, because it's not like Aristotle broke up with Plato after studying with him for 20 years to form his own school. So you bizarre heavy lifting of harmonizing them with each other for whatever reason, and people have been trying to do that now for millennia. So Genghis Galahad, and so far as what the Western philosophy, I mean, I don't know that people have ever tried. I don't know that anyone's ever successfully did it, because it's not possible if you read them, right? If you just read them, you can't even harmonize them with themselves. And I had a professor in grad school that really, really wanted Aristotle to be a lot more systematic than he was. And Aristotle's never struck me as producing a coherent system at all. And I think case in point to that is that you could literally take parts of Plotinus and then add it to Aristotle and publish it in the Islamic period as the theology of Aristotle, and people didn't even really notice it. So I don't know. I don't think that there's a systematic. I think Aristotle's a very systematic thinker. I just don't think he ever produced a systematic philosophy, and therefore, I don't think you're going to be able to pull that off. At least in my opinion. I'm not smart enough to do it. That's for sure. All right, let's go down and get some stuff. Let's see here. I'm just reading through the chat. You guys are more interesting. I'm more interested in reading the chat than I am more interested in reading the chat than me saying things, but that's not why you're here. Let me scroll down. See some more. Oh, top 5 recommended books. Yeah, I need to do that at some point. I get that question a little bit, not a little bit, a lot. And I need to make a little thing. I mean, I would say that you can't really do a top 5 books in esotericism, because esotericism is this huge field now. So top 5 books in alchemy, top 5 books in Hermetic philosophy, top 5. And do you want only academic texts, or do you want primary texts? The secondary academic text or primary text? Because when people say, like, what should I read to understand Hermetic philosophy? I'm like, well, do you want to understand Hermetic philosophy from a academic, secondhand, reliable source, or do you want to read actual Hermetic literature? And so it depends on what people want. That's part of what it's hard to make those lists, because some people want reliable access to primary texts, which is obviously understandable, especially for practitioners. And then some folks want access to scholarly analysis of those texts. And so that's why when I make an episode of something, I try to do both. I try to actually provide both insofar as I can. So typically I try to provide both if I can. All right. Well, I've gotten super behind on questions. What is the differences between the Karaites and the Samaritans, practice and theology-wise? Yeah, it's huge, right? So the Samaritans are a continuously functioning Israelite religion. So they are in many ways a version of Israelite religion that has survived from antiquity, just like Judaism. They share a common ancestor, but they went off. They speciated differently. Karaite Judaism looks a lot like rabbinical Judaism in many ways. There are obvious differences. For instance, the way that the Karaites pray and the way that the Rabbinites pray looks different. But theologically, the Karaites and the rabbinical Jews are very similar at the end of the day. Karaites and rabbinical Jews are very similar theologically speaking. And they're close enough theologically that I wonder if they have to convert over if they want to join rabbinical Judaism. It's a good question. It's a good question for the rabbinut. But the big difference is that basically the Samaritans, with the exception of a few other books, basically only hold on to Tanakh, whereas Karaites have continued to develop philosophy. In fact, many of the big philosophers of the Middle Ages some of them were Karaites. Hoping to meet some Samaritans and some Karaites when I am nearby them. All right. Wow. Okay, that's the bottom. Let me scroll up and get some questions from them. I'm looking forward to seeing the new Dune movie. I've only read the first Dune book and Dune Messiah. Um, so yeah, I think they're great. I think there's a cool episode to be made about sort of religious themes in Dune. I don't know that I'm the person to do it. Maybe that's like Quinn's ideas. Quinn's ideas. He's a really great person who works on Dune stuff and sci-fi stuff generally. Maybe I could work with him on it. That would be really cool. I really like his channel. Do you really think a true source creator made us to condemn us? No, because I don't think that there is a source creator. I think we are. We're on the rock alone, right? And no one made us. At least I don't think. Do I think Nephilim are the Neanderthals? No, because I don't think there were any Nephilim. There were really Neanderthals. Let's see, other questions. Have I ever heard of Joseph Ibn Caspi? Yep, he's famous philosopher, theologian. Heard of him? Well, he's not that famous, but yeah. Why was a vacuum impossible according to Aristotle? Because he thought that anything that moved through space had the space filled, like air automatically moved in behind anything moving, and therefore there was never ever a vacuum in space. It's one of his arguments. He gives like 5 arguments in the physics. Of course, they proved that wrong when you take a glass tube and put mercury in it and then immerse the glass tube in water. The mercury falls to the bottom and it pushes all the air out as it travels, and that's basically a vacuum. At least a pretty, it'll do until a vacuum gets here. So yeah, Aristotle was just wrong about that. He was wrong about that because he conceived of a vacuum he just didn't have the tools to make a vacuum. And then I think Priestley, who was it that made the first vacuum? Maybe it was Priestley in the 18th century did it for the first time. So humble introvert. If a person wants to get a clear understanding of the Bible, what way would they go about doing it in your opinion? The whole Bible is a bit of a beast. And not worth. A lot of it's not. Yeah, the Bible's a bit of a beast. I always tell people, if you want to read the Bible, I always say read the Bible, read the NOAB, the New Oxford Annotated Bible, and read the introduction to every single book that you read, and read the notes in the NOAB. The NOAB is the Bible I go to when I want to academically read the Bible. If I want to read the Bible for like poetic reasons, I might go to read Robert Alter's translation, or the King James for that matter. The King James is a beautiful translation. So that's not good. It's not accurate, but it's beautiful. The Alter translation is much more accurate and much more and beautiful. Not as beautiful as the King James, but the NOAB, the New Oxford Annotated Bible, which you can get a version with the Apocrypha as well, contains, I think, the best apparatus for studying the Bible. If you want to study the Bible from an academic lens to get a good grasp on what that text is and how it works. Texts, again, I think it's really incorrect to think of the Bible as a book. That's the first mistake people make, is to imagine the Bible is a book. The Bible is not a book. The Bible is a library, and it's a library of Israelite literature. Not all of it agrees with itself, because no civilization agrees internally. And then, of course, on top of that, you have the New Testament, which is another library. And even that library is weird and incomplete. Now, for instance, we have letters of Paul, where we have letters that went somewhere, and we have a response, but we don't have the letter in the middle or something. So also it's funny because the New Testament it's sometimes literally letters. Like I think my favorite line in the New Testament, maybe it's from 2 Peter, maybe, where Paul says to someone, hey, and also when I come back through there, make sure to hold on to my coat. I left it there. And also don't trust this Alexander guy, the silversmith or coppersmith or whatever. He's a crook. And I just love the fact that he has to say at the very end of his letter, I left my coat there. Make sure to keep it for me. And also don't trust this coppersmith or whatever. Or when he signs one of the letters, I forget which one he signs, he says, see, I, Paul, signed this with my large letters. Because Paul's not a professional scribe. He's dictating the letter to someone, but when he comes to sign it, he signs it and his handwriting looks like a child's or something, like, kids write big. And so Paul, not being a scribe, he has to say this. And so it becomes scripture. I just love that. I just love that line, hold on to my coat. I've always wanted to get you folks have seen the bumper stickers that have like Bible verses on them, like John 3:16 or whatever. It's just a Bible verse. I always want to get my Bible verse and just be the one, be like, don't trust so and so, the coppersmith. Which be careful, by the way, because you have no idea that if you shortchange someone for your coppersmithing or whatever, they're gonna like write it down in a book, and it's gonna become in the Bible, and you're gonna be always known as the shisty coppersmith or whatever. That's great. So be careful who you rip off. Be careful who you rip off. Let me do a little. Let me do a little show and tell. I try to always do a little show and tell for live streams. And I want to do a little show and tell about book amulets, because book amulets are an interesting kind of amulet. Most of us think of amulets as like either a scroll, a rolled up thing in a scroll, or a piece of metal with something carved in it, or perhaps a virgin parchment or whatever. But there's an interesting tradition in Judaism in which books actually function not only as repositories of human knowledge or repositories of memory, but they also function as amulets, which is to say, simply having the book in your house or having the book on your body or on your person will actually benefit you. It'll actually give you some kind of benefit. And so the most classic example of this that folks probably know about, if you know about book amulets, is the famous book Sefer Raziel Hamalach. So Sefer Raziel Hamalach is a very famous Jewish book of compilation of Jewish magic. And this is a copy I have here from the 19th century. Actually, I need to get it rebound because I feel like it's going to get hurt. But this is a copy from Eastern Europe, published in the 19th century. And folks probably know this is famous for its for the amulets at the very back of the book, the kamayot, written in the angelic script, right? Folks, I'm sure know these. These are really famous to be found here at the end of Sefer Raziel. So at any rate, Sefer Raziel is not just a book with amulets in it, but Sefer Raziel is also itself an amulet, which is to say that if you have a copy of Sefer Raziel in your home, it's said to protect your home from fire. So your house won't burn down. Your house won't burn down if you have a copy of this, Bli Neder. So this is an interesting example of a book that not only functions as a book, but also functions as an amulet. And to wit, there is an entire genre of these books, and there are many of these said books, where these books actually function not only as amulets, but they function only as amulets. This is a tiny little copy of Sefer Raziel Hamalach, right? So this is a tiny little copy, and it's so small that I don't know about you, but there's no way I can flip to the page, flip to the part with the amulets in it. This tiny little book. So here are some amulets, right, from the back of the book. And I'm not sure it's going to focus on them because they're so little. There you go. You can see them a little bit. Tiny little book. But this book is considered still a book by the analysis of books, because you can still read it. You might just need a magnifying glass to read it, but it still qualifies as a book. And therefore, because it still qualifies as a book, it is an amulet. This functions only as an amulet because it's so little, right? And it comes with a little case too, so you can like take it and you put it in its little case. You can buy these online, and you can buy them at farm shops and stuff. So you can take this little amulet, put it in its little case, and then put it in the rafter of your house or wherever you want to put it, so that it will protect your house from fires or whatever. So this gets even weirder. So we have the standard amulet book, right? This is the actual book you would read. And this is a little book that's just an amulet. Now, technology comes along, because technology is always coming along. And technology comes along and says, we can make the books even smaller, and we can put even more books onto something. How do you do that? You take them and put them on. Let me pop this out so you can see this. Oh, come on. There we go. You pop them out and you put them on. Folks, see this? This is the entire Sefer Zohar, like the Zohar, right? But it is the microfilm of the Zohar. what you're seeing is the entire book of the Zohar, but on a microfilm. That's the whole book. It's the entire 3 volumes or whatever of the Zohar. And the idea is, just like in the little book, you might need a magnifying glass to read it. With this, you just need a microfilm reader to read it, but it's still completely readable. So this is an entire copy of the Sefer Zohar. And it says, right, you see it for my folks that read Hebrew, if it'll focus, right? This is Sefer Zohar, microfilm, right? On microfilm. And so this is an amulet as well. Obviously, no one's studying the Sefer Zohar on microfilm like this, but this is an amulet as well. And it comes in its own little case. So you can put it in its little case and you buckle it up so it doesn't get hurt. God forbid. Boop. And then it goes in its own even bigger case like this. I'll show you the bigger case in a second. Right, so it goes in its bigger case where it resides, and Sefer Zohar. Crazy, right? This is the most bizarre little thing. It's the entire Zohar on microfilm. You can buy also Sefer Raziel, also on microfilm, except for it's just one microfilm. This is one little sheet of microfilm. It's about the size of a credit card, and then you can stick it wherever you put it in a book or in your attic or whatever. So this is just a neat tradition in practical Kabbalah Ma'asit, right? Kabbalah Ma'asit, where you can have a book to read, which functions as an amulet. You can have a book which you don't read, which functions only as an amulet. And you can have a book that you basically can't read that functions as an amulet as well. So again, just a little show and tell about sort of amulet culture and how books and amulets, at least in Kabbalah, can go hand in hand with each other. And so I think it's just an interesting relationship to books about how this kinds of stuff works. Someone's asking about my shirt. My shirt is what band is it today? I went and cut my grass today for I think the last time. And so I changed my shirt. Wolves in the Throne Room. Yes, it's a Wolves in the Throne Room shirt. So which I'm gonna wear to, I guess, Shabbat. Wolves in the Throne Room for Shabbat. Black metal Shabbos. So anyway, that's just an interesting glimpse into some of this stuff. You can buy these online, by the way. You can buy. I think I bought both of the Zohar and the Sefer Raziel online. They're not expensive either. You can get them like $10 because it's just a microfilm. And so so if it's interesting, if you're ever interested in buying them, you can find them on Sfarim shops and stuff. So you can get a whole Zohar for whatever. All right, let me jump up and see some of the questions. Was Agrippa's defense of a woman accused of witchcraft indicative of Christian Kabbalist / alchemist skepticism on the subject? I think it was so I don't know what Agrippa's position was. I will say that. I don't know what Agrippa's position was vis-a-vis the witch trials. People that you would expect to be skeptical of the witch trials often weren't. For instance, Thomas Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes didn't really believe in witches, but he believed in the witch trials, which is mind-boggling. I want to write a paper on that at some point. Thomas Hobbes' insane position on the witch trials. Agrippa, I don't know what he thought. I do know that he did successfully defend a woman as an attorney against a witch trial. Now, I think that defense did he do that in Belgium or in Germany? I've read about the case briefly. It's basically, folks, what can happen in the witch trials is that almost anyone who got a lawyer did not die. And the reason why if you got a lawyer, you could survive was that you could always appeal to a higher authority. And almost always, if you appeal to a higher authority in the witch trials, you would get kicked up to an appellate court. And an appellate court would often have a much more rigorous layer of a much more rigorous evidentiary bar. And as you can imagine, most of these women who were killed, the evidence against them was basically nothing. They can forced under Strapata torture. And so if you could get up to an appellate court, you can almost always get the case thrown out. And I think that's what Agrippa did. he basically got the case done up to an appellate court, and the appellate court threw it out. This is also, by the way, in areas in which the Inquisition was very powerful. For instance, in Italy and in Spain to some degree, you see far less executions for witchcraft during the witch trials. And the reason why there is the Inquisition is there, and they have a very thick appellate system. And cases that get thrown up to the appellate court almost always get thrown out. So it's an ironic thing about the Inquisition that in many ways it started a fire that it couldn't contain. And in many ways, in where it was active, the epidemic of violence that you see, for instance, in southern Germany, was not quite as bad, or was not as bad in other places where the Inquisition was actually stronger. So again, the Inquisition is sort of a weird, contradictory thing where it can't be painted as all bad, and it can't be traded. It can't be painted as obviously it can't be painted as all good. So at any rate, let's see. My question has to do with 14th century so-called witch cults and pagan remnants. Realistically, how much cultural continuity does there seem to be, or is it primarily propaganda? 14th century. Wow. Okay. So 1300s. How much continuity survives? I mean, clearly at the folk level, magic was being practiced. There's no doubt about that. Also, it seems like night processions were still being believed in. That seems to still be a belief by the 14th century. It also is the case that there seems to also be the idea, and this is connected to the night battles, is that shape-shifting into things and fighting off witches was also clearly a thing, at least in northeastern Italy, and maybe across all of North Italy, maybe into France a bit. We know that from Carlo Ginzburg's stuff. So there seem to have been some survivals of folk belief, right? Whether you call that pagan or whatever. And I think that in certain other areas like Iceland and Russia, I think paganism survived as a much thicker way, and that you can see this in the executions that occurred there being mostly men. So yeah, I think that there were some survivals. I don't think that anyone was actually practicing pagan. I think what you had by the 13th century was folk beliefs were surviving at the local level, and they were simply being incorporated into Christianity, which is where you see happening in Christianity all the time. Christianity is a very weird religion in that it incorporates a lot of folk belief, basically because Christianity plays a long game that at the end of the day, you will ultimately go over to their side and you will abandon your folk beliefs, or your folk beliefs will ultimately vanish, which proved to be true mostly, by the way. And even in places in the 19th century, like Lithuania, Lithuania had a very strong pagan adjunct to its Christianity, I think all the way into the 19th century. So I'm not terribly convinced that, people will say things like, well, full-blown shamanism was still being practiced into the Middle Ages. I think there's basically no evidence of that, or very little evidence of that. And even the Benedonti, the people that were transforming into creatures to go fight witches, were transforming into them to go fight witches. They were there to fight these people. And so it's ironic they were persecuted for witchcraft themselves, considering that they thought of themselves as like as sort of a spirit quest anti-witch force. And again, that shows you how these pagan beliefs were beginning to be incorporated into Christianity. And eventually that would happen all through Europe, and eventually the paganism would go away like it did in Iceland and everywhere else. So I don't buy the Margaret Murray thesis that there was a witch cult in Europe. I think has been thoroughgoingly disproven. And even in her own day, people complained rightly that she cherry-picked the data. She cherry-picked the data constantly to get what she wanted. And you just can't do history like that. You just can't do history like that. Vegan Alabama, do I believe in aliens? Yes, I believe in aliens. I do not believe they visited here. I don't believe they visited here. I don't believe they can, and I don't believe we will. So I think we will live out the entirety of our existence alone. I just don't see any physical way that we could reach them. I don't see any physical way they could reach us. The physics as we understand it, I don't think allows for it. So I think we're alone and adrift, which actually I'm really happy about. I agree with Stephen Hawkins that these crazy people trying to contact aliens, they can just stop that. Hawkins pointed out that there's never been a contact between a more advanced and a less advanced technology, where the less technologically advanced people didn't suffer enormously. I tend to agree. So yeah, I'm not pro SETI. I think we should shut that stuff down. All right, let me get some other questions before I go. I got 5 minutes left. From a scholarly sense, what I think of Elaine Pagels and Marija Gimbutas. I've not read Gimbutas, so I don't know. I like Elaine Pagels. Her book on the invention of the devil is interesting. I really like her idea that the way the Christians formed the devil was part of a polemical practice with early Judaism. I really appreciate that. I think there's some truth there. Yeah, am I Jewish? Yep. No, I'm not Jewish. I just wear the hat to get girls. It worked. I'm married to a Jewess. It worked. I got to keep wearing the hat now, though. What kind of shul do I go to? I go to a Reconstructionist shul, but the davening that I prefer is more Orthodox davening. I like the Litvak world. I'm a fan of the Litvak world. I'm a Litvish fanboy. I'm a Litvish fanboy. Oh yeah, folks talking about Quinn's ideas. You know what? One thing that pissed me off about Quinn's ideas was that guy is such a fan of Dune. He's such a fan. He's made such great content about Dune, and the people that allow people to see that movie early did not allow him to see the movie early. That is just super not cool. It really made me angry that someone who was so dedicated to that world and is such a person who's popularized Dune. He's gotten hundreds of people to read Dune, and that they wouldn't tip their hat to him to get him in there to see the movie, to do a review or something early. I just really, I don't know. I just kind of I just don't know what's happening there. That kind of makes me sad. It kind of makes me sad. If I don't believe in God, why would I wear the little hat? Because beliefs are little things. People who think that their beliefs matter are people who are full of themselves. And I'm humble enough to know that the things that I believe in are nothing compared to what might be. And therefore, for me, I'd rather stay in a position to be humble about what is and what isn't. So if my lack of belief is no stand-in for me being so arrogant as to just ditch thousands of years of tradition. No, absolutely, Silent Observer. I will cover Nazi occultism at some point. It's a super important form of occultism. It's still around. The amount of Nazi occult or just straight up Aryan occult stuff, or like quasi occult, Atlantis, Indo-European, blah, 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 blah. The amount of that stuff on YouTube is shocking and disturbing. And it parades itself as academic. It parades itself as being rigorous. And the amount of like just crypto Nazi occultism that parades itself on YouTube is mind-boggling, and it's incredibly popular. So sure, absolutely, definitely we'll be covering Nazi occultism at some point. It's an absolutely important thing to understand because it will it'll be around. It will be around. Yeah, the Nazi stuff is all that vril, occulty, Nazi, Aryan swastikas everywhere, and everyone's blue-eyed coming from Atlantis. That stuff is super dangerous. It is an absolute. It's a mental gutter. It's a spiritual gutter. And when your spiritual beliefs are predicated on you being better than other people, you're in the gutter of spirituality. So yeah, absolutely doing something on that. I got no interest in any of that stuff. Yeah, and the amount of like anti-Semitic stuff I get from that crowd, maybe it would blow your mind, maybe it wouldn't. But I get so much anti-Semitic garbage from that crowd. It's just like super gross and boring. Like, and that's the worst part about it. If you're going to be evil, fine. Don't be boring though. This is the most boring, warmed up par of evil. Don't do par of evil. If you're going to be evil, be Lex Luthor. Like, do something. Don't be part of evil. And it's the part of evil that makes me the most grossed out. It's both spooky and gross. Like, if you're gonna go evil, go Azathoth, H.P. Lovecraft. The universe is indifferent to you and cares nothing about you. If you're gonna go all out, go all out. But don't like part of Aryan Atlantis evil. It's boring evil. Boring evil. Hey, Ray Rodriguez, are there esoteric Egyptian mysteries in the Torah, Zohar, or other Jewish books created afterwards? I mean, there's Egyptian influence in them. I don't know if there's esoteric Egyptian stuff. I don't know how esotericism applied specifically to ancient Egyptian stuff. I mean, I don't believe that Moses existed historically, probably, or if he did, he didn't exist in the way that the book of Exodus describes him. So I don't know that he was a prince of Egypt or anything like that. But yeah, there's definitely Egyptian influence. We can see both Egyptian and Babylonian influence on the writing of the Hebrew Bible. I mean, it's a tiny civilization. They mirror the people around them. The big civilization, right? They're the little brother in the room, and so the little brother mirrors the big brothers, and the big brothers are Mesopotamia and Egypt. And so, unsurprisingly, the wisdom literature of ancient Israel looks a lot like the wisdom literature of the instructions of Ptahhotep or Amenhotep or the instructions of Shuruppak or whatever. So I don't think it's esoteric. I think it's you're kind of knocking on the open door. To me, at least, it seems like they borrow not because it's esoteric, but because it's just what everybody did. They just the Egyptians were the literate civilization, and the Israelite scribes looked to them for inspiration and things like that. So to me, there's absolutely no denying that the influence is there. The influence is absolutely there. There's a couple more things that I got to go. Jenny Pendle. Any thoughts on science being propped up as a new religious dogma? I think that there are people who wield science. I think there are people who don't understand that science is a provisional business. That it offers hypotheses that are not disproven yet. That's the limit of what it can do. From a philosophy of science perspective, it offers up hypotheses which cover data points, which, when put together, build theories which haven't been proven incorrect yet. And you have various resolutions of those, but yeah, I'm a big fan of the scientific method, the so-called new. I still call it the new science because I live in the medieval world apparently. So I'm a big fan of the new science. But when the new science is misunderstood and used as a cudgel to beat people with, I just find that to be not scientific and uncharitable, and just it's dogmatic. It's a kind of weird dogmatism, and I find this really a relatively repugnant thing that I see in the new atheists and Reddit atheism and stuff. It's just it's an incorrect understanding of the scientific method, and it's just it's morally repugnant, and it's born out of some kind of trauma, I think. The amount of people who do that, who use science as a kind of stick to beat people with, I find are traumatized. They've been traumatized by religion somehow often, and it's a reaction formation. And so they're playing out a trauma as opposed to being dedicated to the scientific method. And if the scientific method doesn't begin and end in awe, which I think when it does well, it begins and ends in awe. When it doesn't begin and end in awe, and it begins and ends as a weapon to beat religious people with, something's gone wrong. And that, I don't want to be any part of that. The science that I want to do to help unlock the mysteries of the world begins and ends in awe, not in violence and dismissing people's beliefs and making fun of people and saying tradition is stupid and things like that. That to me is it's not what it's about. It's not what it's about. All right, folks, I got to do more of these. I got to do more of these live streams because there are so many great questions that I was not able to get to, and I'm really sorry that I've not been able to get to all of them. But I'm gonna do more live streams because I want to be able to get to all your questions, even if the answer that I can give you is I don't know, which I hope is I know that may be disappointing, but hopefully that's at least you can appreciate me being honest when I say I don't know or I haven't read a book. I never want anyone to believe that I have knowledge that I don't. And I never want anyone to believe that I don't want you to ever get the mistake that I know what I know, and I hopefully I can be honest about what I don't. So, any rate, folks, I'm going to get going. I just want to say again, thank you. Thank you so much. We're almost to 100,000 subscribers. It just blows my mind, folks. 100,000 folks have clicked a button to hang out with me and learn with me and learn together. So I'm just really thankful for that. We're going to roll over to 100,000, and when we roll over to 100,000, I'm going to do a celebratory live stream. Going to drink some vintage absinthe on screen, so I'll be pouring myself a glass of vintage absinthe from 1870, actually. So I'll be getting some of that. So I just want to say again, I really want to express my appreciation for everybody who showed up today. It's 232 folks in the room. You guys make this channel possible. You make my work so meaningful. Even when I'm like waking up at 5:30 in the morning to peck out something about Cornelius Agrippa, I'm doing that because I'm so happy to be just happy to be part of this community and part of a community of folks that want to learn with me and learn from me, and we all learn together. And I feel really humbled and thankful for the opportunity to be able to hang out with y'all, to talk about weird stuff. And I always think of that line from the Craft, right, where the bus driver drops them off in the middle of nowhere, and the bus driver says, "Hey, you girls need to be careful. There's a bunch of weirdos out there." And the witch says, "Mister, we are the weirdos." I guess I like the idea that we're the weirdos, that we get to work on this stuff together and study it together, and have some fun with it, try to be rigorous, all of that stuff. And I'm just really thankful and really appreciative of all of y'all who hang out, for the folks who make this possible on Patreon, for the folks who make it possible by subscribing, liking content, sharing content. You guys make it possible, and I just want to again really deeply express my gratitude for that. Yeah, we should never take things for granted, and my success is totally because of y'all. So I want to express the appreciation. Also, I will say this: I might be moving the live stream days, because, as you can see outside, Shabbat's getting a little earlier and earlier, and at some point, doing the live streams Friday afternoons is not going to work. So I have to move what day we do the live streams. Maybe think about doing them on Sundays, but we'll have to figure that out soon. But at any rate, folks. Again, my extreme and deep felt gratitude for your support of the channel, and yeah, I hope you guys all have a great night. Hope you have a great weekend. Hope you have take care of yourself. Take care of the people that love you, and take care of you loving yourself. You gotta make sure you love yourself. Everyone here deserves to love yourself and to love others and be loved by others. Super important stuff. So yeah, take care of yourself. Love yourself. Give yourself a break. Forgive yourself for something you've done wrong, and find a way to be a little bit better on the other side of it. Other than that, folks, I'll see y'all later, and I'm going to go do some Shabbat with my kiddos and have a glass of wine, at least a glass of wine, probably a bit more, and do a little relaxing myself. So again, thank you all so much. Very appreciative. And yeah, Shabbat Shalom, good Shabbos, and thank you all so much.